My name is Dr. Elias Westbrook, and I never believed in the supernatural. I had always been the skeptic, the man who viewed everything through the lens of science and reason. But what we discovered beneath the ice of the Arctic changed everything. It turned the foundation of everything I thought I knew into a trembling house of cards. The moment we crossed into that frozen wasteland, we all signed our own death warrants. None of us knew it then, of course. How could we? The ancient city beneath the ice didn't look like anything out of the ordinary. It was as if it had simply been waiting for us to find it, buried beneath centuries of frost and isolation. We'd been planning the expedition for months, years even. The team consisted of 8 of us: myself, Dr. Elizabeth Liz Garner, our lead archaeologist, Dr. Frank Denham, a geologist with an unhealthy obsession with the Earth's crust, Maria Vasquez, our linguist and expert on ancient civilizations, Jonathan "Johnny" Morrow, the experienced survivalist and former military, Kelly Tran, our medic who had seen her share of crises in war zones, Dr. Harold "Hal" Davidson, a physicist with a thirst for the unknown, and Samantha "Sam" Lyle, our photographer and chronicler who had come along to document the entire expedition. None of us were prepared for what we found. Not in the slightest. We had arrived at the excavation site 2 days ago after weeks of travel in the unforgiving Arctic cold. The wind had howled like a beast the entire time, and the air was so thin, so biting, that it felt like the Earth itself was trying to push us away. But we pushed on. The research we had gathered suggested something incredible. Beneath the thick layer of ice, there were signs of a lost civilization. Not just any civilization, but one that had seemingly disappeared from history. The first hint of the city came from the satellite imagery, which revealed what looked like large geometric structures beneath the ice. Even the most advanced technology couldn't determine what they were, but the shapes were unmistakable. It was an architectural anomaly that defied any explanation. We were eager, excited. The promise of uncovering something ancient, something that had remained hidden from the world for millennia, was enough to push us past the danger. But as soon as we broke through the surface layer of ice and entered the cavern, that's when the unease began. It was an underground world, untouched. By time, the city we found was like something out of a nightmare. The structures were enormous, made of a stone-like material that shimmered with an otherworldly glow. The walls were adorned with strange carvings and symbols that none of us could decipher. Everything was perfectly preserved, as though time had no meaning here. But there was a wrongness about it. The air was stagnant, thick with a heavy, oppressive feeling. It wasn't just the cold, it was something deeper, something unnatural. The city had been abandoned long ago. But why? And by whom? We had only just begun to explore when we came across the rift. I don't know how to describe it. No words could capture the sheer magnitude of what we saw. It wasn't just a tear in reality. It was a doorway. A living, pulsating wound in the fabric of time and space. It sat in the center of what appeared to be a ceremonial chamber, like a gateway to another world. The air around it shimmered in a way that made your skin crawl, distorting the surroundings in unsettling ways. The rift was large, at least 10 feet high, its edges jagged and shifting like a mirror cracked and reforming. It seemed to hum, vibrate, as if it were alive. No one dared to go near it, but the pull of it. It was undeniable. "Do you think it's some kind of dimensional rift?" Liz asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had been leaning over some ancient scrolls we found nearby, deciphering their cryptic markings. But she kept glancing back at the rift, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "I don't know," I replied, though I could feel a knot forming in my stomach. "But I think it's a portal, one that leads to something else. That's impossible," Hal scoffed, adjusting his glasses and peering at the rift through the viewfinder of his camera. "A portal to another dimension? That's pure science fiction." "I don't know, Hal," Frank said, his voice low, cautious. "But what if it's real? The group fell silent. The wind outside howled louder, the cold creeping deeper into our bones. We had uncovered something, all right. But in that moment, I realized that what we'd found wasn't a lost civilization. It was a prison. We had no idea how wrong we were. The days passed in a blur of unsettling discoveries and strange occurrences. At night, we would sit around the campfire and talk about what we had uncovered, but none of us could escape the feeling that we were being watched. The wind outside never stopped, but it was as if the air within the city was alive. Each time we entered the rift chamber, it felt more oppressive, heavier. It didn't just distort reality, it twisted it, turning our memories and perceptions into something unreliable. Then came the first incident. It was Sam, our photographer, who noticed something off. She had been photographing the walls of the chamber when she came across a symbol that looked familiar, though none of us could place it. As she snapped the shot, the ground beneath us shook violently. It was brief, but enough to send us all into a panic. "Did you feel that?" Liz asked, looking up from her notes. "It's like the whole city just moved." "It's nothing," Johnny said, trying to calm the group. "Just a tremor. We're in the Arctic. Things shift here, all the time." But Sam's hands were shaking as she lowered her camera. She turned to look at the rest of us, her face pale. "That symbol. It's the same one from the wall. It was in my dream last night." "What?" I said, brow furrowing. "That doesn't make any sense. You've been dreaming about the city?" "No," she said, her voice quivering. "It was different. In the dream, I was standing in front of the rift, and She broke off, staring at the floor. I felt like something was calling to me. Something was watching. I tried to laugh it off. Nightmares, nothing more. But something about the way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. There was something wrong with this place. We weren't just uncovering an ancient city. We were trespassing in something far older, something far darker. That night we all went to bed uneasy. None of us could sleep well. The wind outside had died down, but the city felt alive. The rift hummed with a quiet intensity that made our skin crawl. As I lay awake in my tent, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something we couldn't see. The second incident came the next morning. Frank, our geologist, was the first to notice. He was standing by the chamber when he called us over. "You need to see this," he said, his voice strained. We entered the chamber to find that the rift was gone. The space where it had been was nothing but an empty hole in the stone, jagged edges that looked fresh, as if the rift had never been there at all. And yet the air still hummed with that unsettling energy. "What the hell happened?" Liz asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, a loud, guttural noise echoed through the chamber, like the screech of metal scraping against stone. A shadow flickered in the corner of my vision, and I turned, heart racing. But there was nothing there. "Did anyone else hear that?" Kelly whispered, her eyes wide. "I don't know what this place is," Liz said, shaking her head. "But it's not just ancient. It's alive." We didn't speak much as we made our way back to camp. The chill of the Arctic seemed to creep further into our bones, as though the very air was pressing down on us. Frank's discovery had left us all unnerved. The rift, gone. The chamber, empty. There was no explanation for it. No logical reason we could point to. The more we tried to convince ourselves that it was simply an illusion, the harder it became to breathe, let alone think. That night, as we gathered around the campfire, our sense of isolation became unbearable. The wind had returned, howling like a living thing. We tried to distract ourselves with small talk, but the silence between us grew thick with unspoken fear. "We're losing time," Hal said abruptly, breaking the silence. His voice was tense, his usual confidence gone. The rift. What if it was never meant to be found? What if we're not supposed to be here? Liz frowned. You're suggesting we leave? I'm suggesting we all take a step back. Think about what's happening. First, the rift disappears. Then there's that shadow. I didn't see a shadow, Johnny interrupted, his voice defensive. You're just spooked. We all are. No, Liz interjected, her voice shaking slightly. Something's happening. I've been feeling... Suddenly, Sam stood up. Her eyes were wide, her breath coming in sharp gasps. There's something out there, she said, her voice trembling. I saw it. It's watching us. Sam, what are you talking about? Kelly asked, her face pale. The trees, Sam whispered, staring into the distance, her eyes glazed. The shapes, moving. They're watching. At first, we thought it was just a trick of the light, a product of her fear and exhaustion. But then I saw it too. Just a flicker in the distance. A shape moving among the black trees far beyond the camp. It was quick, too quick to be an animal, too deliberate to be a shadow. I stood up, heart pounding, my breath coming in short gasps. The air felt thick with something oppressive, as if the world was holding its breath. What do we do? Frank asked, his voice trembling. We all stood frozen, staring into the darkness, unsure of what we had seen, or if we had seen anything at all. Stay calm, I said, though I felt anything but. It's just our minds playing tricks on us. The isolation, the cold, it's affecting our perception. But even as I said the words, I knew they were hollow. This wasn't just paranoia. Something was wrong. We decided to wait until morning. We couldn't leave the site in the middle of the night, at least that's what we told ourselves. But as we tried to rest, the unease only grew. No one slept. The wind howled outside like a creature in pain, and the silence inside the camp was stifling. The air felt too still, as if it was pregnant with something unspeakable. The next morning, we ventured out to investigate the strange sight Sam had mentioned. We circled the camp, looking for any signs of movement, but the trees were still. The snow was undisturbed, and the Arctic silence was complete. For a moment it seemed like we had imagined it all, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It wasn't until we returned to the city, when we approached the ceremonial chamber again, that the true horror began to unfold. The rift was back. It was exactly where we had last seen it, pulsating with a sickly, unnatural light. The edges of the portal were jagged and unstable, like it was tearing apart the very fabric of reality. It beckoned us, whispering in a language none of us could understand, its vibrations thrumming in the air, vibrating in our skulls. Is it real? Liz asked in a shaky voice, staring at it as though it were some kind of curse. How is this possible? But I wasn't listening. I was drawn to it like a moth to flame. My feet moved of their own accord, taking me closer to the rift, my breath quickening with each step. Elias, don't! Liz cried, grabbing my arm, but her voice felt distant, distorted, as if she was speaking from the other side of a glass. I looked at her, but she seemed wrong. Her face was a blur, her features shifting like a mirage. My mind recoiled. What was happening to her? I looked back at the rift, and it was as though everything else faded away. I could feel the pull of it, the hunger. It wasn't just the rift I was drawn to. It was something more. A force, a presence, a thing beyond space and time. I could feel it reaching for me, trying to draw me into its depths. Elias! Liz screamed. Don't! But it was too late. I stepped forward, past Liz, past the others, and as my foot crossed the threshold of the rift, the world collapsed around me. The air twisted into something unrecognizable. My mind screamed in agony as reality itself seemed to tear apart. Time fractured and the world split into pieces. I saw flashes, horrible, fleeting images of things that weren't supposed to exist. Creatures with too many limbs, eyes that shifted in ways that no creature should, and faces that seemed to bleed into one another, always changing. And then, a voice. It was everywhere. Inside my head, in the very air around me, a voice whispered ancient, incomprehensible words that chilled my soul. It wasn't speaking to me, not directly, but it was with me. It knew me. It knew everything about me, the things I feared, the things I hid from myself. Suddenly the vision shattered, and I was back in the chamber, standing at the edge of the rift. The team was still there, but they weren't the same. I ran. I didn't care where I was going, just that I had to get away from them, away from the city, away from that thing that had become of Liz. The others, too. Their faces flickered and shifted like they weren't truly human anymore, like they had been replaced by something else. Something that had always been waiting in the dark corners of reality. As I ran through the corridors of the city, I could hear their voices echoing behind me. They weren't calling my name. They were calling something else. Something they knew. I feared. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. A seductive, horrible whisper that beckoned me closer, urging me to turn around. But I didn't. I wasn't sure how long I ran, or if I was even going in the right direction. The city was vast, endless, its frozen streets twisting and shifting like a maze. The architecture, the stone buildings, the towering spires, the bizarre carvings on the walls, they were all wrong, too alien, too alive. Every step felt like it was pulling me deeper into something I couldn't comprehend, something I couldn't escape. I stumbled into what looked like a plaza, a grand open space that seemed untouched by time. The air in here was thick, oppressive, as though the walls themselves were closing in. The ground beneath my feet vibrated gently like a heartbeat. I could still hear them, their voices. Elias. Liz's voice floated on the wind, distant and sweet, but there was something wrong with it. You don't have to run. Come back. You're one of us now. I spun around, panic flooding my veins, but there was nothing. No one. The plaza was empty. Just stone, ice, and shadows. I was alone. I had to be. I'm losing my mind, I thought, my breath ragged. I leaned against the cold stone wall, trying to steady myself, trying to push the panic down. But the more I fought it, the more it clawed. At me. I turned and saw it. At first, it was just a flicker, a shape moving out of the corner of my eye. But as I stared, it became clearer. The air shimmered, rippled like heat waves, distorting the space around it. And then it stepped into view. It wasn't human, not anymore. It was her, Liz. But it wasn't, not truly. Her body was contorted in unnatural angles, her skin stretched tight over her bones, the flesh twisted in grotesque ways. Her eyes, her hollow black eyes, were now large and bulbous, dark pools of nothingness. Her mouth stretched too wide, far too wide, and it was filled with sharp, jagged teeth that gleamed in the faint light. Her voice was a rasp, a dry whisper, like paper burning. You can't run from it. You're part of it now. My heart hammered in my chest. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. I backed away, eyes darting around for any escape, but the plaza seemed to have closed in on me. The walls were too tall, and the air felt thick, suffocating. I was trapped. But then I heard something else. A low, guttural growl, like the rumble of a distant storm. The sound vibrated through the stone beneath my feet, and the walls around me seemed to pulse in response, as though the city itself was alive, breathing. I turned, and from the shadows emerged them. I couldn't even process what I was seeing. Their forms were shifting, undulating masses of flesh and darkness, like the city was bleeding its nightmares into the world. They were tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that were far too long, and joints that bent in ways no human body could. Their faces were faces that shouldn't exist. Not in this world. They shifted, constantly changing, flickering between grotesque images, twisted versions of the people we once were. Johnny's face, stretched and broken. Frank's eyes, black and hollow. I could feel their hunger. It was like a weight pressing down on me, pushing me toward the ground, toward the inevitable. Liz stepped forward, or what was left of her, and extended a long, distorted hand toward me. "It knows you, Elias. It knows all of us. It feeds on our fears. It hunts us." My mind fractured. The rift had opened the door. And it wasn't just a door to another world. It was a door to something worse. These creatures, these things, were not just alien. They were ancient, and they were feeding on us, feeding on me. I had to run. There was no other option. I turned and bolted, my heart pounding in my throat. I ran toward it, faster than I had ever run in my life, my heart a drumbeat in my chest. The sound of footsteps behind me, growing louder, closer. They were right behind me. The creatures, Liz, they were all closing in. I could hear their raspy, distorted voices, their distorted versions of the people I had once called friends. "Elias." Liz's voice echoed through the air. "You can't escape." I reached the passage and tore through it, stumbling into the cold. The wind hit me like a slap in the face, sharp and biting, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The rift was behind me now, but the city, it was still with me. I could feel it in the air, creeping behind me like a shadow that refused to fade. I pushed forward, my boots crunching on the ice, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The cold was unbearable, but it was nothing compared to the warmth of them, the things I had left behind. But as I looked up at the sky, I saw something that froze me to my core. The sky was wrong. It wasn't just the pale gray of an Arctic day. It was swirling, like a whirlpool of darkness, the clouds twisting and shifting. I could see the stars beneath them, moving, like they were alive, and they were watching me. The world was folding in on itself. The rift was still open, and it wasn't just a crack in reality anymore. It was a living thing, devouring everything around me. I was no longer outside the city. I had never left. I had stepped into something else. I heard them then, the growls, the whispers. Their voices were everywhere, crawling into my mind, seeping into my very soul. They knew me. They knew everything about me, and they were hungry. I turned to run again, but it didn't matter. No matter where I went, I couldn't escape. The city, the rift, the creatures, they were all one. They were waiting, watching, feeding, and I was trapped, just like the others. I didn't know how long I had been running. Hours, days, it didn't matter. The world around me had become nothing but an endless, shifting nightmare. The rift wasn't just some tear in space and time. It was a living thing, and it was dragging me back into its depths. The sky, once clear and cold, was now a swirling vortex of darkness. The stars blinked in and out of existence, and the wind howled like a choir of suffering souls. I could hear it, always, the whispers, the growls, the presence. It was there, everywhere, watching me. I kept running, stumbling through the icy wasteland, my breath freezing in the air. Every time I thought I saw a familiar landmark, the ground shifted beneath me, and I found myself lost again. The city, the ruins of that cursed place, was gone. Or maybe it had never been there at all. Reality itself felt like it was slipping away. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, far too heavy, too deliberate. Not mine, not the creatures. It was them. "Elias," the voice was distorted, layered with 100 other voices, all speaking at once, some familiar, others twisted beyond recognition. Liz's voice was among them, but so was Johnny's, Sam's, Frank's, all of them. Only they weren't the people I had known. They were something else, something hungry. I spun around, heart racing, but there was no one there. The shadows had deepened. The landscape around me shifted again, the world warping, flickering like a broken film reel. My knees buckled beneath me, and I collapsed to the snow. I needed to escape. But the more I fought, the more I tried to run, the more I felt like I was walking in circles. This place, this dimension, it wasn't a physical location anymore. It was a prison, a maze that folded in on itself, trapping me in a never-ending loop. And then I saw something in the distance, a figure standing tall, watching me. It was familiar, but it couldn't be. It was me. My stomach dropped. It was me, standing at the edge of the twisted skyline, but it wasn't really me. It had my face, my body, but there was something wrong. Its skin was pale and cracked, like ice breaking apart. Its eyes were black, bottomless, and when it smiled, the expression was twisted, distorted, like it was wearing my face like a mask. And then it spoke. "You can't escape, Elias. The voice wasn't mine. It was wrong. A mockery. You are the key," it said. "The portal opened because of you, because of your fear." I felt my breath catch in my throat. The fear. What did it mean? The creature, or whatever it was, stepped forward, moving with an unnatural grace. It was too fluid, too perfect. Every movement was deliberate, controlled. Its eyes never left mine. "You brought us here, Elias," it continued. "You and your team. You opened the door." "No," I gasped, shaking my head. We didn't open anything." But even as I said it, I realized the truth. The rift hadn't just been a doorway. It had been a trap, a doorway to something older than time. And we had walked right into it. The creature smirked, its form shifting for a moment, blurring in and out of focus. Not by choice, but by design. "You are part of it now, Elias. The rift is you." Its face warped, shifting in ways that shouldn't have been possible, twisting into something far darker, something ancient. Its eyes glowed with an impossible hunger. And then, everything shifted again. I was back in the city. I didn't know how it had happened. One moment, I was in the frozen wasteland, running for my life. The next, I was standing at the center of the plaza again, the shadows pressing in all around me. The rift loomed ahead, still open, still alive, its pulses like the beating of a heart. The creature, the one that had been me, was gone, but the sense of dread lingered, thick in the air. I turned, and there they were. The others. My team. But they weren't the same. Their eyes were empty, their faces drained of life, like the life had been sucked out of them. Their forms flickered, distorting and bending, like images on a broken screen. Johnny, Frank, Sam, and Liz, they were not themselves. "I told you," Liz said, her voice a hollow echo. "You can't leave. You never could." "No," I gasped. This isn't real. You're not real." But I knew it wasn't just the rift warping their forms. It was something deeper, something more insidious. The city itself was feeding on us, warping our minds, playing with our perception of reality. "We are part of it now," Sam whispered, her voice low, almost soothing. "It has always been a part of us. You just didn't see it until now." Took a step back, my heart hammering, panic bubbling inside me. "This is all wrong. We're trapped. And then I heard the sound, the growl. From the depths of the city a figure emerged. It was large, impossibly large, its form shifting and undulating, as though it was not quite solid. Its many limbs writhed, its face a nightmare of shifting features, half human, half something far worse. Its eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, everything froze. And then it spoke. "You are the last one." Its voice was deep, resonating in my chest, vibrating with an impossible power. "The rift feeds on fear. It feeds on you." I understood then. It wasn't just the rift that had opened. It was a part of us, a part of me, the fear, the terror, the darkness that I had hidden away, buried deep inside me. The rift had found it, and now it was feeding on it. I turned to run, but the city shifted again. The walls closed in, the sky bled into the ground, and the air was thick with the hunger of the creatures. I was trapped. No matter where I ran, it was the same. The rift was everywhere. The creatures were everywhere. They were inside me, in my mind, in my very soul. "Elias." Liz's voice echoed, but it wasn't her. Not anymore. It was something else, something much older. "You are ours now, forever." And as I turned to face the rift one final time, I realized the horrifying truth. There was no escape. The rift wasn't a doorway to another world. It was a prison. I'm writing this, or rather, speaking into this recorder, because there's nothing left. I know I won't make it out. No one will. The rift, it's not just a doorway to another world. It is the source. It is the heart of this place. And it's not just a portal. It feeds. It is a living, breathing thing. And it has taken us all. I hear them now. I can feel it now. The rift pulsing behind my eyes, its presence crawling under my skin. Every thought, every memory, every shadow I see, it whispers to me. It knows me. It knows all of us. And it wants us. At first, it was just strange things. Disappearing objects, flickering faces. It was subtle, almost like we were just imagining it. But then the cracks started. Liz started changing. Her voice, her eyes, they weren't hers anymore. And the others, they weren't human. Not really. They were things. And the creatures, they weren't just monsters. They were the rift itself, living manifestations of its hunger. They twisted our memories, our fears, to lure us in. They took our faces, our voices, and wore them like masks, playing with us, feeding on us. I thought I could escape. I thought, if I ran, if I kept moving, I'd get out. But the city, the rift, it's everywhere. It's in the air, in the ice, in the sky. There is no outside. There is no escape. When she came for me, I thought it was the end. But it wasn't. The rift had already taken us, all of us. I've been watching them. The others, they're not dead. Not really. They've been consumed. The rift has changed them, turned them into its servants, its hunger. I can see it in their eyes. I can hear it in their voices. They're still here, with me, in this city, but they're not who they were. I know what they want. They want me to join them, to give in, to let the rift consume me too. But I won't. I won't give it the satisfaction. I've found something, a recording device. I don't know if it will even work after all this time, but I'm going to leave this message here, for anyone who might come looking. Maybe you'll find this, maybe not. But if you do, then you need to know this. This place, this city beneath the ice, it's not just a city, it's alive. It's a living, breathing organism, and it has been waiting for you. It feeds on fear. It feeds on your memories, your deepest regrets. It will twist your mind, shape your nightmares, and it will consume you. The more you fight it, the more it feeds. I can hear them now. The creatures. Liz, they're coming for me. I can feel the rift pulling me in, stretching me thin, breaking me apart. I know I don't have much time left, but if you're listening to this, if you're out there, please, for the love of whatever gods you believe in, turn back. There's no escaping this place. There never was. The rift is not a portal. It is a trap, and now it has me. I hit the stop button on the recorder, my hands trembling, the icy cold creeping up my arms. I know the end is near. I can feel the rift behind me calling to me. Liz's voice whispers in my ear, and I know it's not her anymore. It's the thing that took her, and it's coming for me. I can't run. There's nowhere left to go. The city is closing in around me. The walls are shifting, the ground beneath my feet trembling with every breath the rift takes. I hear them now, the growls, the whispers. They're here, and this is where I die.